There is no audio coming out of the Stratford County workshop.
Well, it is, isn't it?
That's a little better.
Where's the?
Still not loud enough.
He says he can hear us.
There, that's financial advisor?
That is Steve right there. Yeah.
All right.
This Steve.
Okay, Steve, you're recognized to speak.
Can get you on the screen. Steve.
Hey, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can't hear
Can
you.
you folks hear me? Okay, thank you.
We can't hear him.
We gotta turn up the volume here.
That's as far as it goes.
Well, that is
Maybe his own microphone is off.
No, we can hear him a little bit, but our.
Love technology.
Make sure you yell, Steve.
Let me do this. One second.
Yeah, that's not going on the top.
No.
It's just like a computer speaker.
So you can hear us now, Steve?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me now?
We can't hear you much.
You can't.
Where's the sound coming from? Is it just coming from the owl? It's coming from the owl. I was wondering if it's coming from the monitors. Can you turn the volume up on the monitors?
No, we can't split them.
So it is coming from the top?
Yes, loud as the owl you get it. Yes.
We're not gonna hear you if you don't say anything.
Is that better? I put my volume up a bit.
No.
Yeah, just talk really loud.
Just talk loud, Steve, and we'll see if we can hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Not very good.
Barely.
Yeah. When you came on, I could hear you fine. Len, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you very loud and clear.
Okay.
They can hear each other, but it's our speaker that's the problem.
It's not gonna get any better, right? So you just have to be
Is the
quiet.
volume all the way up on the owl?
It is.
It is.
Yeah, I think you're right. Just start and we'll be quiet.
Yeah, so my name is Steve Massaroni from Public Financial Management. We are the county's financial advisor. I'm a director in our Boston office, and I work with local cities, towns, counties when they issue municipal debt. Is that coming through?
Yeah.
Okay. Ray just asked me to zoom in tonight, mostly to answer questions, but just give a brief overview of the market.
Hold
I
on,
mean-
please. Is everybody satisfied with this?
No.
Okay.
So, yeah, Cliff has.
Yeah, no, I'm trying. I'm not-
He can't hear.
This isn't working.
Can I go get the other owl?
You can try it if you'd like.
Where is it? No, it's all the way down.
So on that speaker, it has a plus and a minus. Should we try to get that plus?
Say something.
Testing.
Testing.
No.
What about?
Okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute recess to try to make this better. How's that sound?
Thank you.
There's no way to get it into the screen mics, the screen speakers, right?
Hey, Steve, this is Len. It's definitely on their end because I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, thanks, Len.
Did you get a shot?
Oh, that's an idea.
You know what? I got my freaking speaker right next door. Oh.
Yes, I can hear you.
You lost the owl. Owl's off. Can we shoot it?
We still heard him though.
Yeah.
And when he spoke, when the owls off,
Oh, yeah.
it was the same. as-
Yeah, I
How's
agree.
not working?
This
I agree, Dan.
How's not working?
I agree.
monitored.
You can put-
Because-
Yeah, I think that's really good.
Sound, it sounds the same. I agree.
So something happened. Yeah, it's, we gotta monitor out of this sector.
Yeah, they can hear it. They can hear each other. Our speakers don't even know. We have a meeting. We need to have. We have to have, we have to have a forum present. And then we can- Doesn't make a difference, subcommittee.
You're gonna use the same owl, you gotta try different owls.
So I'm not really 191.
Steve.
Yes,
I think it's coming out of this.
Say something, Steve.
testing, testing.
It's not coming on.
It's coming out of one of the,
Oh, it's coming out of one of the monitors?
Yes,
That's what I thought.
that's what I thought.
Turn the monitor up. Then the TV.
That's Max.
trying.
Yeah, the
Well, that's
audio
obviously not-
settings.
it's coming out of the other TV?
But the others are Max too.
Steve, can you just talk?
Sure, testing, 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 testing.
Yep, we got you. It's working.
What happened? Well, what?
Nobody moves.
No.
What's that?
Nobody moves.
Oh, right.
I have, I have neglected to take attendance. We don't necessarily need it for anything other than, who's gonna get paid for this, trip today. So, yeah, you wanna,
Passing.
oh, I'm sorry.
Anchorberg?
He's on. He was on. He's on Zoom.
No, he's not.
No, he is,
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
just he doesn't have his camera on.
Oh,
I got him.
yeah.
Bailey?
Aye.
Bay?
Present.
Bickford?
Yes.
Bigsby?
Yes.
Cannon?
Here.
Conlon? Connor?
Oh, we'll see.
Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
Granger?
Here.
Harrington?
No, not here.
Grassy?
Here.
Corrigan? Corrigan?
Or Mr. Hargan from Durham is here.
Howard?
Here.
Howland?
So,
Kaczynski?
here.
Lamontagne? Here. Thank you. Newton?
Here.
Hare? Here. Finney? Dietrich?
Here.
Potenza?
Here.
Rich? Here. Rich? Software?
Here.
Levin? Turcott?
He's here.
He's
I'm
on.
here on, I'm here on Zoom, but you, Stratford County, we have no visual on you right now.
Vincent? Wall? And Schmidt?
What's up?
Yep.
Financial advisor? Please advise.
Thanks. Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
All right, great. Thank you. Good evening. Nice to be with you folks tonight. My name is Steve Massaroni. I work at PFM Financial Advisors. We're a municipal advisor. I've been working with the county for a number of years. Based out of Boston. I'm a director in the Boston office, and I cover local government, cities, towns, counties in New England. I live in Rhode Island. I would have been up there tonight, but I had a conflict here in Rhode Island for a meeting. So it's good to be with you. Ray asked me not to prepare anything, but to be available for questions and perhaps just give an overview of the market, interest rates, what's going on. As there's a lot of volatility, so I'll just give a brief overview and then be here for questions. But I think, as most folks know, the markets have been very volatile, both the municipal market and the treasury market. We've seen rates over the past 2 years increase. Short-term rates are extremely high, as most folks know. 1-year treasury is over 5%. And there's an inversion in the yield curve, in the front end of the yield curve. Actually, municipal bonds have actually done pretty good this year, despite some increases. Up until the summer, we had seen relatively um, relatively stable rates, and consistent with historic norms. We got spoiled over the past probably 10 years or so, where we were in an extremely low interest rate environment. But if you look at historical norms, for example, the 20-year general obligation bond had averaged about 4% for the past 30 years. Over the summer, it's because we got teased at 2% 20-year rates. Over the summer, though, rates did increase as inflation did not decline, and as the Fed continued to raise rates. We had a nice rally in the market over the past 10 days or so, with some better economic news relative to inflation, that perhaps inflation is going down, and rates have gone down. The 10-year Treasury had hit 5%, I think, a couple of weeks back. It's probably now in the mid fours or 460. Just to give you an idea of some municipal rates, we sold a Connecticut local government bond, single A, same rating as the county. Last week, the 20-year rate was a 456. This was down about 30 basis points from the prior week. The historical average, as I said, for a 20-year bond for an A credit is probably around the 4%, still above average, but really not too bad. The yield curve is fairly flat when you go from 20 to 30 years. So a 30-year bond today, for example, would likely be in that high 4%, 4.75 to 5%, whereas over the summer it was probably a little bit lower than that. The expectation is no guarantees where rates are going. Nobody can predict. I did see a survey today of a Bloomberg survey of economists, and the thought is rates a bit higher for a bit longer, but first quarter, towards the end of the first quarter of 24, the expectation is that we will start to see a decline in rates at all levels, both short-term and long-term rates, and that decline is gradual through the first quarter of 2026. Again, no guarantees where rates are going to go. Nobody has a crystal ball. But if you look at some of what the economists have said, and I'm not an economist by no means, but just some of the surveys that have come out recently over the past week or so, the expectation is that long-term rates as well as short-term rates will come down as we get into 24 and the end of 24 and into 25, with the yield curve getting more normal slope, if you will, where short-term rates will come down. I think as the Fed pauses its rate increases, hopefully we see that the front end of the curve comes down. But for the county and the expectation of issuing bonds, probably not in the near term, but at some point as we get into 24, 25, 26, the expectation is hopefully we get back down to historical norms or below, slightly below historical norms. So that's the quick economic update. Happy to answer questions relative to bond issuance, interest rates, or whatever the folks have questions on.
Back there.
Are bond interest rates static?
I wouldn't say static. No, I mean, uh, they're extremely, they're all over the place. We actually get an index, a daily index of municipal bonds, and we actually get now every 2 hours an update on where municipal bonds have moved, which is fairly new. We used to get updates on a weekly basis. We used to get updates on a daily basis, and now we get hourly basis, real time movement of interest rates. So it has been extremely volatile, and you can see movements. We haven't seen this in a long time. We're seeing swings in rates of, there was one day last week where we saw a 15 to 20 basis point swing in municipal rates in one day, which is extremely volatile.
Wait, another question here first. Then I'll come back to you.
So, sort of just a clarifying question, so the bond offering rates are, it sounds like they're fluctuating as a fair amount. But, once you, commit to a bond, is that then a fixed rate?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Most cities, towns, counties issue fixed rate bonds. Once you lock in your rates, you no longer have any risk on the rates. So you're locked in for the term of the bonds. The bonds usually have a 10-year call provision, and it's an optional call at the issuer's optional call. So if you issue rates bond today, and 10 years from now rates go down, you're able to refinance those bonds at lower rates. And the county has taken advantage of refinancings over the years. So that's an option for the issuer, that they can call those bonds. If rates are higher, the bondholders can't put back their bonds. They're locked in for the term of those bonds once you sell those bonds.
Okay, go ahead.
So for these bonds, is the idea for a 30-year term or a 20-year term?
Yeah, given the size of the transaction, so when you think about the term of the bond, number one is based on the useful life. If you issue tax exempt bonds, it's based on the useful life of the project. So for example, if you have a school with a 50-year useful life, you can certainly issue 20, 30-year bonds. Conversely, if you have a school bus with a 10-year average life, you can't issue 20 or 30-year bonds. Given the size of the nursing home project, the recommendation would be for a 30-year bond. For a couple of reasons. Number one, for budgetary purposes. Number two, again, the slope between 20 or 25 and 30 is fairly narrow, and has been fairly narrow over the past several years. So, that could change if there is some steep slope in the curve when the county's ready to issue their bonds. Perhaps that plan of finance may change a bit. But in the past, we have been running for a 30-year amortization.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the financial advisor? Oh, pardon me.
The schedule, I saw a schedule last time we had a meeting, and it declined the payment over the years, and I've seen that in other times. And yet some are consistent, the same payment for every year. Do you have a recommendation as to how the payment schedule should be?
Yeah, so there's two basic amortization schedules. One is called what we call level debt service, which is simply level payments over the term of the bond. And that's, you think of a home mortgage. Your mortgage payment doesn't fluctuate. You have the same payments over the 30 years that you get your mortgage. Then there's what's called an amortization that's level principal, where you're amortizing, $100 million. It's level principal payments for the 30 years or the 20 years. In that situation, it's a little bit more budget pressure early on, because you're going to have higher payments in those earlier years. But over the life of the bonds, there's significant savings because of the fact that you're amortizing that principal quicker. So depending on, budget capacity, that's a decision that'll be made as we work through the plan of finance and capacity in the budget, whether the county is able to do the level principal or the level debt service structure. And there's some variations. State law doesn't give you too much as far as variations in what you can do, but there are variations. For example, if you had a fall off in debt, and I know you just recently had a fall off in debt, you can sort of wrap around that fall off in existing debt to sort of layer it in, and it's not uh, that big of an impact on the operating budget. But service similar to a mortgage or level principal, which is a little more aggressive.
Well, I missed some of what you said. The sound didn't work out. But do you have a recommendation knowing, whereas you know the finances of the county?
Again, given the size of this project, really it's going to come down to if the operating budget, and I know Diane and Ray have been working through some additional revenue sources to pay the bonds. It'll all depend on what the total package, if you will, looks at. What are the expected revenue available to pay the bond? Can it be done in a equal principal fashion or a level debt fashion? I have to be honest with you. You know, you can flip a coin as far as my clients. I have several clients who go with level principal. I have others that go at level debt service. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just based on budget flexibility, budget capacity, interest rates as well. For example, in a lower interest rate environment, there's not much of a benefit on the level principal over the level debt. There's a little bit of a benefit in a higher interest rate environment. While it's a higher budget impact, there can be considerable savings for a level principal structure. So again, it'll depend on timing when the county's ready to get into the market, what the interest rate environment is, what the budget capacity is. Those factors all go into planning and modeling for the bond.
And legal costs, the legal costs run for bond of this size.
Yeah, so good question. Cost of issuance. So there's fees that go into any bond issue that you issue. The main fees really are the fees for the rating. You have to get a rating from Moody's. You have a rating right now. Bond counsel fee, as well as a municipal advisor fee, and there's some other fees for printing and such. For this size of a bond, to be honest, I would put a range, and don't hold me to this. But for a bond counsel fee on something like this, the legal fee I would think would be in the $50,000 to $75,000 range. For this, again, for a transaction such as this.
You say 15 to 75 now?
I said 50.
Okay. Thank you.
And again, don't hold me to that. That's one of the ranges that we typically see for a bond transaction of this size. The rating fees, for this bond transaction, the Moody's fee could be a 50 to 60,000 alone for the rating on the bond as well.
Is there any other type of financing we should look at? Because other than I assume this is a commercial bond or just a New Hampshire.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch all that question. I'm sorry.
Are we talking about a commercial? Are we talking about where you would go out to a Wall Street company, Goldman Sachs, say?
Yeah. So yeah, good question. So the way that bonds are sold, essentially there's two ways. It's public market, number one. As I think some folks may know, when we do the TANs every year for the county, we do a bank direct purchase. It's not that big a number. For when we're talking about large dollar amounts, it's a public transaction. So it would be a public, tax exempt, rated transaction based on your Moody's rating. It's a competitive process where you solicit proposals in a competitive environment from those firms that you just mentioned, like a Goldman Sachs or a JP Morgan or a Bank of America, they all submit bids to purchase the bonds, and basically it gets awarded to the firm that submits the lowest bid on the bonds. There's a lot of work that goes into this before you get to that point. The county has to prepare a disclosure document, which talks about some of the historical trends in finances, talks about the service area, talks about the county demographics, as well as the project overview. That document takes some time to develop, and it gets sent out to investors across the country to give them time to do their due diligence before they submit a bid.
Thank you.
As well as, one of the other important steps is to engage the rating agency Moody's to secure a rating on the bond. So that process as well, the county folks will meet with Moody's, discuss again some of the same things, the service area, the trends in finances, the fund balance, and things like that, project overview to secure a rating on the bonds.
You all set? Any other questions for the financial advisor? Goodbye.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
Blended someone.
Oh, sorry, didn't even look at it. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve, for taking the question. The question I have is more of, I think, might be helpful for the delegation. You talked about the inverted yield curves that are happening now. I think it might be helpful, other than the volatility, to explain to the delegation what other types of things an inverted yield curve typically signify.
Yeah, I mean, inverted yield curve could signify, recession down the road. I think again, not an economist, but I think what most of the economists and experts are saying is, if we get this inflation number down, and it has come down quite a bit, that the Fed can stop with their rate increases on the short end. Now, understanding that the Fed only is raising short-term rates, and there's not a direct correlation to short-term and long-term rates. Generally, what happens is the yield curve starts to flatten, which it did, and invert when the Fed started increasing rates. We've started to see the short end of the curve come down a bit, which is good. Now, conversely, the long end has gone up a bit as well. So we're starting to see some more slope in the yield curve. I actually was just looking at some rates. The 1 year was at a 333, for example, and the 20 year was at a 383. These are AAA rates. So there is a little bit of slope in there. I'm not, we're not out of the woods, I guess, as far as inflation is concerned. But again, the information I saw today, it was a Bloomberg survey, is showing that we will start to see rates at all maturities, if you will, or tenors start to come down again as we get into the first quarter of 2024. And again, I don't want to. I already mentioned this, but we did see a significant rally in the market the past week or so, and the short end came way down. We saw, in the municipal market, as I mentioned, 1 day swings. They were higher in the short end, 16, 17 basis points, a little bit less in the long end, which again, a little more slope to the yield curve.
Thank you. My only point was, and you made it, was that inverted yield curves do typically historically signify the potential for a recession. I just wanted everybody there to, hear that from you. But thank you very much.
You're welcome, Lynn.
You have another question?
Well, it's about the inverted yield curve. The inverted yield curve almost always means recession is coming, because it does not make sense for short-term bond interest rates to be higher than long-term bond interest rates. That means that people are spooked. It's almost a one for one for the last several hundred years that an inverted yield curve does mean a recession is coming.
Okay. Anything else? Shall I dismiss the financial advisor? Thank you very much, sir.
Good night. Have a good meeting. Take care.
Jonathan? You're up.
Good evening, everybody. Is it okay if I stand over here?
Someplace where you're near the mic.
I need to be here, Mike.
Do you wanna go in the front?
I can.
All right, can you hear me? All right, so I want to start by, the last time that we met and talked about the building, I had shown you a video, and told you it was a massing study. If we could pull that up, can we play that? And while we're playing that, I just want to explain to you guys that this is what we call schematic design. It's 30% of the effort in terms of designing the building, so we're about 30% there. Everything that I'm talking to you about tonight is based on 30% of what I know, in terms of definition of the project. There are still many things that are out there that, have yet to be defined, but I want to hit on, while he's showing you the video. Nope, we're gonna move back to the other. So while he's showing you that, here we go. There we go. So I realize it's a small picture far away, but we've, over the last 4 months, have spent a great deal of time refining the design. We're starting to look at, you're gonna see here what the outside of the building is taking shape. You're seeing the massing right now, basically focuses on the roof. We've talked about the roof potentially supporting a solar array. That solar array in that area is roughly 45,000 square feet, which can handle about half of the electric load of the new nursing home. We've started talking about wayfinding in the building. And you'll see as we begin to go around, the wings are color coded, with different colors. We have, done an analysis in-house and come up with an exterior building envelope, if you will, which is a composite metal panel. In some ways similar to what Merrimack did, but it is different. The technology is different 20 years later. But just a couple of highlights to get out of the way. The proposal today, after all the program that we've done, the building is 310,889 square feet. It is 6 stories tall. There are 268 parking spaces. All of that is summarized on the front left letter in this packet, so you don't have to write anything down. We have added a garage, a small garage off to the side to handle the vans for the nursing home. And we have sited the outside generator off to the left. The civil engineering has progressed to the point where we've done the grading. We know the borings are complete. The civil engineer is ready to run with full civil drawings to get into the state permitting queue. The building is designed 14-foot floor to floor, with plenty of space for above ceiling for all distribution of mechanical systems. We are talking with the state. So municipal projects like this for the county, by statute, don't fall under the city of Dover. They're actually controlled by the state. DHHS does the review. The state fire marshal's office will step in and be the building inspector. So we're designing this to 2021 IBC, 2018 life safety, and the next, the anticipated change in the FDI guidelines for healthcare guidelines for the Department of Health and Human Services. Anticipating that we'll pull a permit sometime next summer. The building supports 215 licensed beds. Currently, there are 235 beds in the building. There are 235 single bed resident rooms in the building. And 235. So we're licensed for 215, and we have the capacity for 235. So the conversation around that is that we want about 10% for, in terms of maintaining maximum occupancy for changeover. When you have a death, when you have a hospice, you know, the opportunity of having a family stay next to the resident that is passing. The transition of rooms, so you don't want rooms that are down, you always want to have 215 beds available. The additional rooms, it was discussed, 4 months ago, we had talked about not building out 2 wings of the 4th floor. And we decided that, by bringing children in motion, the childcare into the ground floor, which supports 57 people, that we would move those beds up and build out the 5th floor. It also gives you the opportunity of conversation to talk about having the rehab suite, which is again, an introduction to the county nursing home, to the process, to the program that you have here. Again, my recommendation to the commissioners was let's design it. You can always scale it back. We don't have to build each wing 5 stories high. We can go back to a 4-story scheme. So each wing has 12 rooms. We could back it out 12 rooms. We could back it out 2 wings back down to closer to 215. We talked about the solar array on the roof. We've talked about geothermal. Du Bois King has gone back, and that is the preferred system moving forward, and we're going to begin to explore that a little bit more. There's some additional design work that needs to be done in terms of determining the tonnage for the mechanical to define what we need for the number of wells. From a preliminary standpoint, the difference between a fossil fuel system and a geothermal system is a $5 million premium for the wells. So if we go geothermal, it's $5 million more because we have to drill the wells. But you amortize that in, and that conversation we can talk about a little bit more. Geothermal makes a lot of sense if you decide to do a larger solar array on the farm. If you have the ability to pay for all of your electricity on the county farm, geothermal with electric heat pumps makes all the sense in the world, knowing that you have that resource there. Du Bois King did go back and confirmed, there were a number of questions at the last meeting with regards to availability of natural gas, water, sewer. That's all been confirmed. And we've started a conversation with the city of Dover around the utilities. Now, the big number. Today, at 30% design, the building construction cost is just shy of $150 million. The total project cost is just shy of $170 million. We're exactly where we were with the full build out, where we were 5 months ago. So with that tough part behind you, I'll walk you through. You're going to see in this packet, I wanted to give you as much information as you might ask for. The first part of this pamphlet is actually the program. I have spent the last 5 months working with county staff to define the needs, the spaces that are required to support the home, the adjacencies, all of that. That's all reflected in this Excel spreadsheet, which is divided by floors. So you can actually go through and see every space. Noted here with square footage. These numbers are net square feet, meaning they're the usable space inside the room. There's a multiplier that we use, which is roughly 35%, which is for the thickness of the wall, for all your circulation, all your utility spaces that are sort of ancillary to the program. The program comes out at 301,000 square feet. The design is for 310,000 square feet. We came pretty damn close to our goal. So we can talk through the program. I want to walk you through the site plans. If we can go to, yeah. So again, very similar to where we were a month ago. We still have the long drive, the cul-de-sac, the covered porch cochere, if you will, at the main entrance. We have 260 plus parking spaces that circle the building. We have a fire lane that's required. The garage is off to the right in the back. And what you're seeing is the footprint with the 5 outside courtyards, if you will, in terms of layout. The one concern that we had was the impact to wetland, and we have a very minor, small wetland impact as we anticipated at the very curb cut coming off of County Farm Road. But it's considered minor, and it's nothing more than an application that it should be approved based on that application. There's no oversight beyond that. The next plan talks about, this gives you an idea of what the basement, we call it the lower level. We have modified the plan from the plan that you saw 3 months ago. We only have loading on one side of the building. There are 3 overhead doors at dock height on the right, or the left, I'm sorry, and 2 compactors that are mounted to the building. So there are no outside dumpsters anymore. Everything is disposed of from inside into compactors. So everything comes into the building through these loading doors, goes directly to walk-in refrigerators and freezers, that goes directly into the kitchen. That kitchen then is directly adjacent to the 2 elevators at the middle of the building, which access all of the utility space on each of the floors. So we have a back of house, consider it the inside donut, if you will, that is support space on each floor. So that the kitchen serves all 5 floors above from the center. Off a little bit further higher on the page is procurement. That is everything that purchasing buys, from depends to paper clips to whatever is stored here. Again, adjacent to the utility circulation, vertical circulation. We then have laundry, all the aspects of that. Completing the circle down to the right, maintenance on the bottom, and to the very bottom of the page, we have actually moved all of the employee dining rooms off of the floors and made 1 employee dining room in the basement. So we have just a very small servery counter at the employee dining room spaces that employees can access, but there's no sitting space or tables or dining room, if you will, on each of the floors for employee staff. Their dining room would be in the basement, which is directly adjacent to the kitchen. So the kitchen has direct access and can serve employees directly from there. Any questions on the lower level? Yes, sir.
So, the model you just described with regard to the employees' dining room, is that modern, the latest science in terms of the best way to do that? Because there are nursing homes being built right now, just coming online, going out of service and so forth, that have all kinds of different arrangements probably. But this thing you've just proposed, is that current state of the art in terms of the best way to handle it? Because I can imagine if you got somebody up on the top floor that wants to have a meal, for them to go all the way down to the employee dining room as opposed to eating in an empty room or a little utility space or whatever, doesn't sound like a practical arrangement to me in many cases, but speak to that, please.
So centralizing dining for employees in one location is the most efficient way to do it. We actually, when we polled and we did the survey of employee staff, of course, everybody asked for their Christmas list, everything that they could possibly want. Every department wanted a kitchenette, every department wanted a refrigerator, every department wanted a microwave and a coffee. And I only had to start to say that to Ray, and knew we're not doing that.
No.
So we needed to pull back. And there was a lot of conversation in our office about efficiency and how we can do this. So what we decided to do is, on each of the floors, there's a servery for the resident dining rooms. What we've decided to do is to do a small room adjacent to the servery that is an access point so that the staff doesn't have to engage with the resident. But they can go in, they could perhaps get a packaged sandwich or beverage or coffee, but there's no place for them to sit right there. If you're on a floor, if I'm a nurse and I'm gonna take 10 minutes and I just wanna grab a sandwich and I'm gonna go run back and eat it at my desk anyways, that's all that they need. So,
You don't have to sell me on all the details. If you're telling me
yes, sir.
this concept is the state of the art.
Yeah.
I'm gonna trust that you know more about this than I do.
It is what they're doing, and the other side to that is we have looked very hard to minimize this footprint and to reduce the square footage. And I've had several people in the office review the program to make sure that we're not duplicating, that, you know, just because what you have over there now is stretched out into many rooms, we're bringing it all together. I mean, for example, purchasing scattered throughout the building, whatever room they have, they're packing, you know, the boxes stacked everywhere. We're bringing it all back, creating shelving that is, you know, where they can document everything and track it at the library. So the efficiency, you might have had purchasing within, you know, 10,000 square feet. We've managed to squeeze it down, so it might be half that. Same thing with this dining room concept.
Okay.
The same dining room concept is been used at Sullivan and Merrimack.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So I know I said this before and, you know, I'm new here and based upon that I looked, you know, when this, the last architectural design was trashed and we have this now. Just what you were saying in regards with square footage and all that. So if you had a square or a rectangular building versus what you've designed, you have more square footage, you have more room for solar panels, and possibly you actually reduce the height of the building since the building is not all chopped up like it is, and you'd actually have more room per floor. So you know, that it looks great and all that kind of stuff, but I mean, I know enough about it that's more economical and efficient. And then going back, I'm a total geothermal fan, you know, I'm a fan of that, always have been, but why wouldn't we go straight VRF versus air to water? Because the cost to run pumps and maintenance on a geothermal system, of course, can be very expensive. And since we already have natural gas piped in, it just seems to make sense.
So let me answer your second question first. So Du Bois and King is still analyzing. Yes, there's no disagreement with you. The natural gas is available at the site, and anything other than natural gas is hard to fight with in terms of cost per therm and the
Correct.
cost to deliver. I'm not arguing that. What we're saying is that if you want to look forward and do something more green, the idea of geothermal with electric heat pumps, should you do solar and have the ability to basically get free electricity, at that point, Du Bois and King has come back and said, that system is cheaper than natural gas.
I understand. I get it.
So there's an analysis that needs to happen before that final decision is brought to this board, to this group, and that decision is made, because I'm not going to make it on my own. To your first question, which is a very basic question that happens from the beginning of architecture school to yesterday, is, you know, a square building is the most cost-effective way to build in this, in the sense of, someone said it to me years ago, the cost of a building is reflected in the number of corners the building has. The problem with, I'm being honest, the problem is with a square building, it's dependent on how the building is used. So with nursing home care, there are licensing parameters that require you, that a nurse station has to have visual connection to every resident door. So I had this argument with George and Ray early on when we were talking about a building on the other side, is that if I build a square box and I have a corridor that runs like this, I have at minimum 2, if not 4 nurse stations, because I have to see every resident door from that nurse station. So there's a diagram, and what we spend a lot of time developing here is the efficiency of operations at the end of the day, because you have to have so many nurses, so many LNAs, so many aides, based on the population that you have, and then that number is cut down at night. So if I only have 1 nurse on the floor and 1 aide at night, in this particular design, there's 1 nurse station that can see down every corridor. So there's efficiencies, because if I have 2 nurse stations, or I have 3 or 4, that means I have 3 or 4 nurses at night, and 3 or, you know what I mean? It's a multiple. So part of the challenge that's been given to me is design something that is staffing efficient, so that we can deliver the best services that we can with the least amount of help to accomplish that.
I'm gonna let you handle the hands up here. Go ahead.
Go ahead over here, I'm sorry, you've been.
So, I remember the last time the issue of bond came up, it was 172 million, and, that building we didn't go with. The primary complaint was that it was too expensive. So the current one, the one we're currently looking at, it seems to be just as expensive. So if you include the interest of the loan, or, of the bond, you're looking at let's say 4.5% interest over the course of 30 years. That's $310 million. You know, plus the legal fees, keep it at 310. You divide that by the actual population of Stratford County, that's $2,367 per person, women and children included. All right, and then in order for them to pay it back up, you take a typical wage in Stratford County, you divide that by how many hours they would have to work, to figure out how many hours they would have to work in order to pay for their portion of this. That's 102 hours per person, hard labor, including children, right? Because I don't know if that's what percentage of the population is kids, but they're gonna be paying for it anyway by the time they get old anyway, so it doesn't matter, throw them in there. If you include that with the number of beds that are in there, we have $1,319,000 per bed, but that's twice what a new home construction is. So we're paying a ridiculous sum. Why can't these numbers be lower? Is this something that we can't do?
It's not that you can't do it. I mean, some of the numbers you're talking about are beyond me. I don't know how you did that analysis, and I'll let Ray
Well,
respond.
the only thing I have to say is that that doesn't count any offsetting revenue.
This is only the cost of construction, not running the thing. The running the thing's another matter.
So I can tell you that Harvey has spent a considerable time and effort looking through historical numbers, projects that are ongoing with them. The cost per square foot is roughly $500 a square foot. I can tell you that today, a normal commercial building with nothing in it is 300. I heard today on the way up here, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, but Portsmouth just announced they're building a police station. It's 30,000 square feet and the budget's $68 million. We've done as much as we can to reduce the efficiency of the building, the footprint, the size, everything. We can still pull square footage out of this building. There's 24 beds that could go away. There's a childcare that could go away. These are all things that you already support, and they actually have the opportunity to create more revenue. It's something for you to balance and to think about as we move forward.
But did you do anything? So the price is the same.
Yeah.
It's a completely new building. The reason it was kicked before was because it was too expensive, but the price at the end of the day is the same, and it's exorbitant. It's an absurd cost. What explains this?
Have we handled this topic?
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
But can we let other people,
Go ahead.
get into the conversation?
With no answer,
Go ahead.
I think we're gonna talk about the schematics of this plan right now. But one of the most obvious reasons for the wings also to have enough window space For the residents, every resident should have a window.
It's
So-
required.
Yes, so if you make one big box, you're gonna have a lot of space inside with no windows, or not enough space to get the same number of beds.
I disagree.
That,
Go ahead.
You can't.
I disagree, I 100% disagree. I think there's the difference in the cost of construction. You look at this, you have all these spokes that are coming out, so you make that like there, you cut that off and you make it bigger. I completely disagree. You still have your center person in there. I think that there's a lot of opportunity here. I think you should be looking at cutting 50 to 70 million off of this. In every way, shape or form. This is not a private nursing home. We want to help our indigent. I think this is definitely needed. There's no doubt. I support this completely. I know that we are heading into some pretty dark times with our budget, and I just think that this needs to be better, and not so elaborate and not with all the spokes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things that is important to remember is that there's the initial cost of building, and then there's the cost of operation. And the cost of operation is actually much bigger over the long run than the cost of building. And if you can, in the way that you build something, if you can build it so the cost of operation will be reduced in the long run, you're gonna get much more savings in the long term than you would if you reduce the initial cost by, say, 50 million, you're gonna end up paying much more than that 50 million in lost efficiencies. So I think that the idea of having the spokes for the nursing stations so that they're all visible, that is something that will reduce the staffing costs for the life of the building, which should be 50 years. And if you look at those staffing costs versus the extra cost of building that spoke system, I think that, in the long run, that's a vast improvement on the financial efficiency.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so when it comes to this plan, I prefer this to a regular box because during my lifetime, I've spent quite a bit of time in a hospital. And I don't know how many of you have had that type of experience, but light is important, and having the ability to see the outside is important. And when these people may be stuck in these beds for who knows how long, they need to have access to basic sunlight. We can't just slap a window on the ceiling of a rectangular building and expect people to get sunlight. This way we can maximize the amount of rooms that actually have window light. And to kind of go back to the economics of this in terms of having a square building, we kind of answered our question why it is a little bit more expensive than just a rectangular or square building, because there are additional components.
Okay, so it wouldn't be.
Representative Corrigan has.
So thank you. Well, certainly this plan is more than the absolute bare minimum. I think that's appropriate. And the current nursing home, we're looking at the operating budget or the executive committee, it appears to get about over 90% of its budget is paid for by revenue other than the county taxes. And a lot of that revenue is because people have chosen to live there. So it's not just the indigents, and even the indigents have some choice, like whether their family wants to send them to this county nursing home or other one. And yes, we may even get some people choosing this over a private nursing home, and I'm not necessarily, my mother lives in a private nursing home in Portsmouth, but I'm not necessarily upset about people about competing with that facility. So will some of these features help us get more revenue and make it more attractive to potential customers? Because it's not going to be just quote unquote the indigent who have no choice is going to be here, but even very poor people have a certain amount of choice over where they go.
Okay, okay. Do you have something?
no,
You're all set, Kelly?
All right, so just to speak to that, this is taxpayer money. So
Yes.
this is not your money. This is, we have a
Taxpayer.
fiduciary responsibility. So this is what I'm talking about, okay? So this is what I'm talking about, so everybody can understand what I'm talking about with Square. This right here saves a ton of money, millions of dollars in regards with all your spokes, okay? That's what I'm talking about. That kind of design. And the other thing is, police stations are very, very different. They're very different than a nursing home. And my daughter was in the hospital for over 4 months, from literally January all the way up until, or end of January, all the way up until June. So we were up at Dartmouth. Well, we were at Boston Children's, and then we were at Dartmouth. So they built the whole addition at Dartmouth. I can tell you right now, it doesn't look anything like this. It's pretty much a rectangle, and there's tons of light. It's gorgeous. So it's being done, and we're talking about state of the art. So we saw it, we were there, we watched it from the time they were in construction to when they opened. So that's what I'm looking at, that's what I'm thinking.
So I would just say this, I agree with you. Take the diagram that you just showed everybody and turn it 45 degrees. That's the partie for this here. The issue is that you can't, so you've got 4 spokes going off from diagonals. It's exactly what you see, the X in the middle of the building. I have 48 beds. So the other issue that goes along with that is if you stayed with just 4 wings, what happens is you have 200 feet of hall to get to the last bedroom. So the whole idea was, all right, we add 2 more spokes. You're adding 2 more wings to that diagram that you yourself said is the diagram you're talking about. That's where this came from.
Is Representative Bailey.
Hi. Thank you. In a world of cheap video cameras and video surveillance everywhere, why are we so concerned that it'll all be visible from a nurse station? Well, a TV display of the video cameras will be visible at a nurse station.
We have standards that we have to meet that are DHH licensed.
Okay, over here.
So the feds are doing it.
I just wanted to say,
Increasing our
we
costs.
can't necessarily rely on video cameras to handle everything. It's way more reliable to rely on the human eye, which somebody, a nurse, can see at all times guaranteed.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, with the new guideline, if we're planning 235 single bed rooms, and my mom is in assisted living, we have to have 235 windows, right? And that's new. That wasn't true when we did the other nursing home. And I actually think that Representative Potence's diagram isn't that different from this one here. It's just that they're thinner, so you can get more windows.
Go ahead. The exercise, to both of your concerns, the exercise is an issue of the rooms have to be dictated how big they are. So I have a certain linear footage of exterior wall that is defined by the size of the room that I have. I just stack the rooms. I have to have a window, 1 window per bed, a minimum of 1 window of certain size per bed, and you go around. I mean, the problem with the idea of a square box is you have more perimeter. By the time you do all of the rooms all the way around, you have the area in the middle, you don't need that much space. And FGI guidelines don't allow you to have rooms that look inboard, if you will, to an atrium space. They have to have an outside window. They have to be projected to the outside.
It's amazing. Go ahead.
So how many quotes did we get from architectural firms, when was there only one quote that we went with, or were other people applying for this?
6 altogether.
6 altogether, can we maybe go back to those and see if they're capable of providing a better cost?
If you want to appropriate the money. I mean, first of all, one thing is, if we don't take action in the next 30 days, we're gonna lose $15.3 million.
That's pretty small.
Okay, I'm simply laying out the fact, it's your determination, whether you want to walk away from that money or not. And we committed to Warren Street for $6 million, so when you add the 2 of those together, we're walking away from 20, so let's round it off to $21 million. You're elongating the project, so you're risking an inflation issue. The one thing I did want to mention, because it was brought up we staffed this design and it was 10% less staffing required in this design than pre-COVID staffing at Riverside. So I just wanted to throw that out. It's actually 18.63 nursing staff less, which equates to about $1 million.
How much would it cost to actually, get other quotes?
Well, the cost of the quote is nothing. It's the cost of the paying them to do the work, that's the cost. So I think to bring it to where it is, probably, there's no reason to think it'd be any less than the $5 or $6 million that we're paying Warren Street now.
In 6 to 8 months down.
Oh, anyway. Yeah, anyway.
Okay,
Yeah.
question?
Yeah, so, once we have the new, facility, we're going to be getting revenue from that, right?
Yes, correct. And that's what was laid out at the last meeting.
Right, so if we, and that revenue is going to be higher than what we're getting at Riverside, is that what you said?
Substantially higher.
Okay, so if we delay the construction of the building, we lose that, we lose however many months or years it takes, of a delay, we lose that much revenue.
Yes, sir.
Back there?
So question about that, does the revenue actually make up any significant difference, or are we talking, how much are we talking, what is the difference in revenue per month?
In year two, in year three, starting in year two, it pays the bond. Starting in year three, it exceeds the bond at 4% over 30 years. You've got those documents to have for the last meeting.
That's an accelerated plan.
That's making certain assumptions about staffing and also that you can actually fill the thing up.
Well, all right, we got a lot of hands up now. Finish this one.
I simply wanted to say that we staffed it and it came out to 18.63 staff less, which equates to about $1 million.
Okay,
In
you
staffing.
put your hand up?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I kind of want to go back to what Steve started off with, and that the dining halls and such, if I may. I'm familiar with Carroll County and Oxford and the Bullfrog Bay nursing homes, and I was incredibly impressed with Carroll County nursing home. Now you walk into there and they have a large dining area, but they also have wings where they have places to dine and small kitchenettes in that dining area. And where you were on that subject, I wanted to ask you if you're doing something similar to that here, like.
We do. We have cafes that are directly adjacent to the nurse station in the center of the space. There's a family dining space on each floor. So if you come and want to meet with your mom and you want to have dinner, you can eat from the server. They'll serve you in that private dining room, if you will, that family room on each floor.
Oh, okay. Now they serve like their midday meal in the wing. They bring the meals out to them. And to everyone there, dining area.
That's an operational thing, whether people are actually fed in their rooms or they come to the dining room space, it depends on the resident. At least now.
Well, they do, well, I'm familiar with anyway, so I'm asking you, is there enough space for that sort of thing?
Oh, absolutely, we have programmed all of the dining rooms to not only on each floor accommodate the 48 residents that are on the floor, but we've talked about the number of feeders that we need to have in addition, so people come and eat and they actually have somebody that assists them to eat. So you're not just sitting 48 people, you might be sitting 60 people. The dining rooms have been designed size-wise to accommodate that.
And how big is the dining area, the hall, there will be a hall for, when they have events and things like that, how big would that be?
Well, there's several spaces in the program. There's a theater space, there's a chapel space, there's an assembly space. There are multiple spaces on different floors that allow for larger gatherings. Spaces you don't have now.
Well, that's what I'm looking for, is a larger gathering. What they did, they have a large, later meal, and then people had a chance to mingle.
Yes.
During their dining.
There's a
And they have
library.
assembly, you know, like a Veterans Day program.
Absolutely, it's
So how
important.
much seating would that accommodate?
It depends on the space. Some of these, rooms can accommodate 150 people sitting. If you had a chapel event,
Oh,
a memorial, Veterans Day type of thing. And then we have other spaces that have been combined, like activities today. Is a very small room in the back and it's chopped up with columns and all sorts of things. But there are several PT and OT activity on the fourth and fifth floors are very large spaces. They're 3,000 square feet. So, you know, you could accommodate having a big crowd if you had to.
that's what I'm looking for.
Yes, in those spaces.
George, you want to say something?
Well, there's a couple of points I'd like to make. Number one, we asked Jonathan to include 10% expansion capacity in the building. So when you see the proposal, it says it's for 235 beds. We're licensed for 215. So you could take those additional beds that we had asked Jonathan to put in this building and cut them up. Now, when you do that, you save about $10 million. If we get rid of the solar on the roof, we'll save another $1.2 million. So you're around 11 million. So those are some things that we can talk about in terms of we're trying to reduce the cost. But I want to speak specifically about the layout of the building because I think it's important for you people to know this. We have 3 buildings on this complex. We call them Building A, Building B, and Building C. Building A is the original Arms House. The original Arms House was a U-shaped building, shaped like a U. Okay, built in 1880. What they learned from that U was a bunch of stuff. Okay, about staffing, so on and so forth. Jonathan went over that. We had a U. In 1971, what we built was back-to-back T's. In 1971, because it was more staff efficient. It's this building is a modernized building B. Got a bunch of T's, okay, back to back. Building C, we built in 1978. I was at the county delegation when we did it. Along with Chuck Grassley. We built that was a square. Okay, we met the regs at the time, they built the square. The reason why they built the square was because they all had to have an outside window. So in the center of this big giant square, they used to call it Dumont Square Donut. We used to call it, referred to that years ago, because Paul Dumont was chairman of the board of commissioners at the time. He fought like hell to have this big square building. Okay, but the center of it's wide open. Now I can tell you, when that building was, that's got the center wide open, we have spent millions of dollars since I've been here maintaining that. Just the facts, okay? Water intrusion, snow load, snow, everything is the open of the donut is open for the weather. So the most important thing that we discussed with Jonathan was, I didn't care if the thing looked like I didn't care what it looked like, octopus staff, I didn't care. What I wanted was staff efficiency. Because we learned that with the old, within the new county jail. We went from the old jail to the new jail. It had everything to do with staffing. Now, this particular design saves us approximately $1 million a year in today's dollars in operating expenses. If it's a 50-year building, that's $50 million, not adjusted for inflation. So practically half the cost of this building will be paid out over the course of its lifetime with staff savings. Just that end alone. That's on the expense side. Now, Ray has talked to you, we've mentioned to you multiple times about revenue generation. There is no way on hell's earth that I would support doing anything in this county if I didn't have a way of paying for it. It's as simple as that. It's not any more complicated than that. Okay? How do we pay for it? I don't want to raise anybody's taxes. I never have. I've been here 40 years, okay? I don't like raising people's taxes. I also know what we have to do. I know what we have to do. It's like when we built that jail. I knew we had to do it. The question was how? How do you do it? And how do you do it by saving taxpayers the expense of it. Which is the reason why we went through this design to attract additional revenue. Now, we're losing revenue today. We're bleeding revenue. We have for a very, very long time. We can't capture that additional revenue in the Medicaid system, the Medicare system, because we don't have a facility to do that. So we don't have the facility to do it. President Riverside won't allow us to do that. Okay, we don't have the physical plant to be able to do it. This design, whether I like it or I don't like it, is immaterial. What is material to me is how we generate revenue and how efficient it is. That's what matters to me. You know, and what matters to me is how do we control and hang on to staff? And right now, we're have difficulty with staff because we're in a market. And how do we meet the county's mission and goals? That is where we're coming from. My colleagues not coming from. We want a square, we build squares. We know the efficiencies of squares and not the efficiencies of squares. You want T's, we know the efficiencies of the T's and the non-efficiencies of the T's. We know with the U-shaped building, because we operated that way with 80 years with the U-shaped building. We know the efficiencies of that. We have all the historical documentation for that. So what was important to us was operational expenses. When you get done, right now we're spending $30 million a year running this. When you get done, that facility will be probably 10 or 15% of the total cost of what you're going to spend over the next 50 years. It has nothing to do with its design. It has everything to do with its efficiency. Efficiency is what we need to keep our eyes and minds focused on. Okay, how do we staff it the most efficient way we can? And how do we generate revenue? That's what we're talking about. Okay, if we've got to do it, then how can we do it the most economical way we can do it? And how much is it going to cost us long term to operate? Because that's where you spend money. Now, let me give you one other quick thing, and I'm going to go back up here and shut up for a while. Jonathan finish with this presentation. We had the U, we've had the T's, and we've had the squares. I worked with those people who built that T, and I worked with those gentlemen who built that square. Okay? At that time, we had 140 nurses aides on staff, okay, and 56 nurses. When we first opened that building, we dropped that number down to 90 over the course of time. 90. We're talking about in this building having about 68 or 70 nurses. Not counting nursing staff, just talking about nurses. We had all kinds of experts back in '78. Chuck Rathman, he was there with me, telling us we're gonna have staffing, this and that. We never talked about, and back then we were paying people a nickel and dime over minimum wage. The staff, that's what we were paying, the cost. A lot of things have changed in those 40 years. A lot of things. The Medicaid and the Medicare system has changed dramatically. Now, another thing you've got to remember is that the federal government is going to pay for more than half of this building throughout its lifetime. That's why they have the standards. That's why they created all these standards, because they're paying the bill. Okay, we're paying some of it, there's no question about it, but they're paying the majority. That's why they created all these things like the windows, you know, and the single beds and the single bathroom, the single shower. All those things are a result of what CMS has learned over the last 60 years when Richard Nixon first started the Medicare program. Okay? Those are the things that they've learned. So we're relying on Jonathan's ability of the last 30 years of designing nursing homes in our state to bring the best ideas forward that we can bring and meet all the rules and regulations. So you get a starfish, that's what you get, in order to make it as most efficient as possible. So I think you need to hear some of that history, because I think that history is important. Those gentlemen I worked with 40 and 50 years ago, okay, who built those buildings, had the elderly in mind, not the indigent. I can't stand that term. When I hear that term, it infuriates me. We're talking about people who worked all their lives, who have lost their homes. 80% of the bankruptcies in this country are caused by healthcare. 80% of the bankruptcies. In New Hampshire and I live free or die state, they're all hard. We'll allow you a prepaid funeral, okay? And $72 a month. Everything else we're taking. So it seems to me, from my perspective, letting them have their own toilet and their own shower is not much to ask for. When you're talking about people who pay taxes all their lives. And that's the other thing you gotta keep in mind, because if I'm for the sake of God, you will end up there. I've worked with county commissioners who ended up in that mission. Okay, good people. Great people, worked all their lives, lost their homes, lost everything to their illnesses. And so that's what we're talking about. Okay, creating that ultimate safety net for people, and what do you want it to look like? Do you want to have some pride in it as a community? Or we can stick with what we have. Eventually you'll build it. You'll have no choice. The numbers are gonna drive it. We got 16,000 people right now over the age of 65 in this town. You're gonna have 56,000 people within 15 years over the age of 65. Where do you think those people are gonna go? Cemetery. Yeah, eventually. But they're gonna make a pit stop on the way to the cemetery. It's gonna be in a facility something similar to this. So. Yeah, John, can you continue your presentation?
You got a few more people on this question. We're gonna go to this side. Tim?
Yes, glad George mentioned the prison, because many of the design considerations in designing an efficient prison are not like a nursing home. You want the staff there in order to react to what happens as quickly as possible. So that's why the hub and spoke. That's how the new prison was built. And actually, of course, I mean, most of what goes on in the prison is more medical emergencies, more than like just people misbehaving, although even most of them will have medical. So isn't that actually like, isn't that actually a very, so isn't like prison and the nursing home in many ways very similar?
They are very similar.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone over here? Yeah, I get it.
I know it may be useful for bookkeeping to make this distinguishing characteristic between the federal money, county money, and town money. In the end, it's all us. The federal money is just our other pocket.
I think
We haven't saved a damn thing by making the feds pay some piece, but that's us too.
Okay. Go ahead.
So 50 million over 50 years. That's the efficiency that we're gonna be getting for this. The interest alone over 30 years is almost 3 times that. So here's another question, and I have a follow-up. Does the current nursing home generate enough revenue to pay for itself? Or does it cost taxpayer enough? It doesn't? Then why would we ever believe that this new nursing home would ever pay for itself? You talk about revenue, it's still gonna be losing. It's still gonna be a net loser. It's still gonna be costing taxpayer dollars.
Because the care, the different categories of care under the Medicare system allows us to build skilled care at a higher rate than the Medicaid rate, which is what we're receiving now. So we're at $200 a day roughly. Medicaid rate, you're looking at $600, $650, $700 a day in today's dollars for the Medicare rate. Okay, and that's the difference. Now, I get you, I agree with you, it's all on, it's everybody's money in the end, okay? But the Medicare system was established by Richard Nixon, okay? To prevent poverty for the elderly. That's why it was established. We all pay payroll taxes our entire lives to the Medicare system. So that insurance will be there when we get old.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's just the facts, that's not George McLaren's talking, that's reality, okay, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Those are the facts, okay, we pay for it all our lives. So what I'm saying to you is that if we can take advantage of that system and get our share of the pie, and not jerk people around like we've done for the last, I don't know, 30 years anyway, when they get sicker and they need skilled care, instead of moving them, we will be able to keep them in-house and bill for a skilled care rate at $600 a day. And that additional revenue, which we can't do now, will be available to us to help retirement. We have that, If we do the solar piece, what we're talking about, we'll save somewhere between $600 and $1 million a year, depending on the nature of how we do it. You got the staffing efficiency, which is another $1 million at minimum. We've got the Medicare additional revenue, which was running about $8 million, right?
It's whatever was passed out.
Passed out in Lori Schematic's, right, it's Lori Schematic's report. Okay, we asked her to do it because she's opened a bunch of nursing homes, so she knows what she's talking about. So, as time goes on and things change, that's what drives the revenue question. Because things have changed. We're just not changing with them. Quicker, okay? Because we don't have the physical plan to do it, just like we did with the chair. It's not any different.
Chuck has it.
Yeah, I just had a question, and this is something we talked about at the last meeting, maybe Ray can answer this as well. Because we talked about when somebody goes into the nursing home, somebody that's currently in the nursing home, who may be a poor resident that's there, financially, whatever situation, but the thing is, when they go into a nursing home, you have to keep that bed open, right? On average, how many beds do we have at any particular day open, because people that are in the hospital or at a rehab facility someplace?
Anywhere from 6 to 10.
Anywhere from 6 to 10.
And it happens
So-
today.
So what you're doing is this is $200 that we're not getting.
That's correct.
And we can't fill the bed. So, and if we were able to bring them back here from the hospital, we would get over $600 per bed when they come back. So in a sense, what we're doing is our avoidance cost here would be not losing the $200, the gain is about $800 a day. That, we're looking at here that we will be better off by being able to provide these nursing services. Now, again, we talked about this all the last meeting, so it's frustrating to talk about it all again. That, this is something that, just looking at that situation alone with, 10 beds a day, I mean, we're talking almost $4 million that, we're looking at that we're losing if we don't do this.
No question about that.
Okay, Kelly, do you have something?
Yeah, I have a lot, so let me I have to say that we're talking about all of these things. We're talking about revenue, we're talking about projections. That's all coming from a place of speculation. Nothing is guaranteed. And, I understand, I appreciate everything that you said, Commissioner, but also there's a piece of like, you're talking like kind of in an angry tone in a sense. There's no us against them here. I don't know any one of us on our side that doesn't want a new building to help these people. Not, well, maybe one. That's it. So, but in any case, exactly. So there's just a lot of things, like, let's just talk about solar. This isn't about making it a square. This isn't about, I believe that you are completely qualified to be able to come back to the drawing board, to do less angles, to do less cuts, which cuts down on the cost of construction. Because solar panels aren't all sunshine and rainbows. There's a cost to maintain them, and then if they break, and then there's only one state right now that takes them, and it's tens of thousands of dollars to be able to take them. So yes, there's all of these wonderful things that we can do. And then even geothermal, if we even went down that path, you're gonna have to have the staffing for it. There's so many different things here. I believe that you guys could go back to the drawing board and have less angles, and you could do something that is not as expensive. I believe that could be done and still have efficiencies and still have everything that you're talking about. It's not like we want to, they're not gonna have a toilet in their room and not have light. We don't want any of that. I believe that there's a place to do it. It seems as if we are trying to compete with a private nursing home, and that's not what this is. Gosh, we could lease this out if we wanted to a private entity if we're looking for something like that. I want to have quality of life. We want to have spaces for them to meet with their families. But there's tons of stuff that you can do. For example, an outside atrium, instead of having something that's inside or whatever that gives outside space, that's then less angles and all of that kind of stuff too. That could save. There's lots of different things. Like I said, I know how much Dartmouth spent, I know the size, I know how they did it. And it is pretty much like a rectangle, so. I don't, I understand where you guys are coming from. I know that there's certain regulations, federal and all of that. I believe that I think that you could do it. I think that you guys could do it.
Is there
And you
any,
can't guarantee revenue. You can't guarantee
anything
revenue.
from over here?
Yesterday, I had her hand up about 3 years ago.
Well, yeah, I
Go
would
ahead.
just really like to keep it to schematics, this conversation, as we were. Last week, we did go over all the revenue protections, and I think some of you weren't here. But we're still in the basement level, and it's after 7:30. I would like to hear the rest of the presentation, and we keep it focused on your presentation.
Fair enough. Go ahead.
Sure. So we can flip a slide and go up. The first floor, that you see here on the screen. The bottom of the page is the porte cochere, if you will, which is the entrance to the building. As you come in, there's a lobby and welcome station. Off to the left. There are on the first floor, there is some utility spaces, the hair salon, those kinds of things that we talk about being the downtown, the market square. We have nursing supervision in one wing on this side, and on the right-hand side, we met with administration and with Ray and all the rest of it. And they came down from the third floor. They're now on the first floor, which is close to the front door. Those spaces are all wrapped around a 5-story atrium space, an enclosed space, a green space that becomes sort of this significant symbol space, if you will, for the entire home. If you recall, when we were talking about the Hyder site on the other side, there were 3 courtyards. We've scaled that back when we came over here. I'll talk a little bit about, I just want to mention in terms of the conversation about the square and the size and all the rest of it. This is, in some ways, the design of this building is a puzzle. When we moved, and I don't mean that in any other way than so that you understand, when we moved from the Hyder site, we had to find a parcel of land that was big enough to accommodate a building of this size or of some size. And initially, the commissioners had told me that they didn't want a building to be more than 3 stories. That residential scale that people were accustomed to. The parcel of land that we're on now, the Eric Drive site, is very small. And small in the sense of what we have for wetlands and what we have for buffers. So this building was designed basically taking into the constraints of the buffers of the wetlands that exist. So I can't just put 100,000 square foot square building on that site. I've got to create a roadway around it, and then an envelope that is left. So when I say puzzle, there's a lot of factors that come back to this. In terms of the square, I would challenge you and invite you to come to my office, and I will work through with you so that you understand. If you take the linear footage along the outside of the perimeter of the building and just stretch that out to create a square, you're gonna find that that building is enormous. And what do we do what's inside? The problem is, you can say it's the feds, but there are licensing requirements. Every resident room has to have a window to the outside of the building. I can't have a resident window that looks inside. We could 10 years ago. We did, Merrimack County has some resident rooms that look into the atrium space. You can't do that today. There are standards. So what happens is you have this envelope, this long hallway, all these resident rooms, and then I have way too much space in the middle of the building. What do I do with it? So there's an efficiency when you look at how you lay this out, that these resident rooms that have linear footage to the outside have a minimum of an 8-foot corridor, which is required by healthcare standards in order to get a gurney out of the building. The standards tell me the size of the room. The standards tell me the size of the hallway. it dictates today exactly what we have to provide. And here we are. So I'm gonna flip to the second floor. So let me back up. So on the first floor, one page. So if you're looking at this diagram, entrance, there's a pochette gray piece off to the right-hand side. That is the daycare, the children in motion space, so that you understand the amount of space that it takes on the first floor. That's off to the left. There is a designated drop-off, a designated entrance, a designated outdoor play space that is fenced in specific to that use. The remainder of the space in the back, in terms of talking programmatically through with all of the staff, we've decided that the behavioral unit would end up on the first floor. So the balance here is 42 beds on this floor that would be dedicated to a behavioral unit, which is a lockdown unit. On the second floor, again, same footprint along surrounding the atrium space. To the left, you've got volunteers, you've got the post office, the other ancillary spaces that are utilitarian to the residents. You have a chapel in the left corner, open to below. You've got the hairdresser, the seating for the dentist. And you've got nursing supervision along the right-hand side. The second floor has been dedicated to a memory unit, and we've divided the unit in half, essentially drawing a line down the middle. Same nurse station serves both units, but we've divided it in a way so that each unit doesn't have to support more than 24 residents. 48 memory residents is very difficult to get. 48 people in the same dining room with feeders, with other things. So we've divided it off and to try to control the staffing and the chaos that goes along with the memory resident. Third, fourth, and fifth floors are skilled nursing floors. The third floor has social services, IT, admissions, billing, infectious control, and staff development along the front of the building. The remainder being skilled care. The fourth floor similarly has the physician's office, theater, the activity space, which is along the front elevation, that long space, and HR to the right. Again, these are all wrapped around that atrium space with the utility space in the middle. On the fifth floor, similarly, the fifth floor is dedicated to OT and PT. And in addition, I want to mention that there is a space on each floor that is designated for OT and PT. So if you can't come off your floor to go to the fifth floor to have PT, PT will come to you on your floor. So that's something that they can't do today. And it's very difficult in some cases to get a resident to move them the distance that they have to. So we've accommodated for that. There's a room plan here. Nothing more than to explore the size of the solar system that we could have. The central stair actually accesses the roof, so you can actually vertically get to the roof from the inside of the building. There are 4 elevations of the building. You'll see that what we've conceived here is that the building would be built out of an insulated composite panel with some appendages to the outside. The panel looks like siding, if you will. It has a perforation on the outside base. And you'll see some color variations on each of the wings that go from blue to pink to yellow. That's part of what we're talking about for wayfinding on the inside of the building. So I live in the blue wing, I live in the red wing kind of thing, so that as you access the building and you know where you are. That's been brought to the outside of the building so that you can see that. There's a couple of perspectives that show you what the outside of the building are, and you've seen that with the video. I'll take any other questions that you have. There are other things here in the packet, just so that you know, we've actually gone to the extent of laying out what the kitchen would be, to know what the equipment would be, the ventilation requirements. There is, in the design, there are several chases that come from the mechanical room in the lower floor that go all the way up through the building to the roof. So we can bring all the ductwork up, distribute it horizontally on the floors. There's a chase in the back of the atrium that takes all of the makeup air that's required for the kitchen all the way to the roof. Trying to think. There's a number of documents in here. You'll actually see the cost estimate from Harvey. Basically, itemizing and telling us that the current design was roughly $149 million. And you can see how that breaks down. They've actually given you the spreadsheet. I have basis of design for mechanical, electrical, plumbing, which is in here. There is the geotech report, which is summarized here so that you know what we found in terms of all of the borings. The historic piece is attached. The archaeological report is here. We have a clean bill of health. In terms of moving forward with permitting. There's an email here from Revision, basically summarizing what he told you when he was here, that the system proposed for the roof, should you go down that route, is worth roughly $1.1 million. Just a couple of quick things so that you understand where we're headed here. We have big picture. So this is all subject to, final approval and everything from the delegates, but we have to spend $45 million, $40 million by December of 25. And what I have asked, and I mentioned this at the last meeting, is we want to start construction, site work construction, summer of next year. We want to accelerate the beginning of work to next June of next summer. That gives us 18 months rather than 12 months to spend that amount of money. Harvey has actually done a pay down and a billing out. This building is going to take 3 years to build. So we have 12 months initially to spend $40 million to not lose that ARPA money. 12 months, if something happens and we miss the mark of spending that money by that, we're going to lose it. So the idea here is to move site construction up 6 months. Start the site, order steel. We can do that extra 6 months guarantees that that won't be an issue. But in order to have a construction start in June, I'm going to continue with the building design. What we're looking to do is have the civil engineer go right into construction drawings for the site to get the permit set into the state DES sometime in February. They take 3 months to do their review. So the only permit that we have right now is a very small wetland permit and an AOT permit. And we believe that we can have that in hand by May of next summer, which would give us free bill of health to move forward with construction. So our proposal is to do a 2-phase construction management agreement where the contractor would first give us a guaranteed maximum price for all of the site work. I would finish the design come October of 24, and they would finally price that, and then they give you a GMP for the whole building, for the whole project going forward.
I do have a hand up.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so, at some point, there was a question of making the top floor, essentially half built, sort of with the possibility of expansion. And I'm not sure if that's something that was still something was in play. I think that the idea now is to just build a complete top floor. But if we, went to that sort of, that previous plan of making the top floor half built and then, potentially building it later, would that, what kind of a premium would that be for when we eventually did build that extra space?
So those two wings are probably worth $10 million. So my recommendation to the commissioners, when we discussed this back months ago, was the capacity, we always wanted to build something that had some future ability in the plan. By cutting that out, there is no future expansion. My advice to them was, let's design the 5th floor, let's price it as an alternate. So if you decide not to build those 2 wings on the 5th floor, we just put a rubber roof on it. 10 years from now, when you decide to add the floor, the steel's already designed, the building is designed to carry that floor. You simply add, you go out, you put it on the bid, you purchase the materials and you build that floor, take the roof away and fill it down the road. So it's done.
Okay, so, but I guess my question is, so you say it would be 10 million to do that now. What's the likely cost of doing that in 10 years?
I can tell you over the last 3 years, construction costs have probably gone up 20%. So I can't speculate what it will be 10 years from now, but it could clearly, it could be another 20 or 30% premium on top of what it will cost you today.
Okay.
Jim?
Yeah, wouldn't also building the 5th floor, the second half of the 5th floor, like while the building is occupied, wouldn't that cause a certain amount of disruption for the residents and the staff of the building?
It would, but we've occupied, we're renovating Sullivan County now, and it's a fully occupied building, and we're making, people are gonna live through it. People are gonna die through it, but, that's what happens. I would argue strongly that the county should look at rehab suite, because in my mind, rehab is like you've been talking about. People leave the home, have surgery, go to a rehab hospital somewhere, they don't come back for months on end. The other thing is people that aren't ready for the nursing home, look for a place to go to rehab. And having a rehab suite in the building is an introduction to the county home. People will show up, you guys have phenomenal service. You take care of the people that are there. The buildings that you have are just tired. When they come in and they see that the building is state of the art, it's brand new, it competes with anything else, people's minds are gonna be changed about, oh no, I'm not going to the county park. They'll see what is out there ready. And it's a huge revenue source. The other piece to having a new facility is it attracts staff. People want to work in new facilities, they want that state of the art. They want, and when you're competing for staff everywhere, having a newer facility helps.
John, you have more of your.
I have a lot more, but I'm gonna stop.
You're going to stop. I'm tempted to go for an adjournment at 8. How does that sound to this group?
I would think it'd be better.
5:08, did I just hear you? One more question, go ahead, and then, well, here's what we're gonna do, it's up to you. We can do 2 things, any questions, send them to Ray via Janet. And we can come back again for another meeting, is that agreeable? So why don't we just end with your question and then we will adjourn.
I absolutely love having the childcare on the 1st floor. It's a playground. And I think having a pathway for residents to walk by the playground would be beautiful. I'm not clear about how the atria is on the 1st floor. In that rectangle, are any of those spaces open to the hallway, or do you only access it through those two little entries at the end of the figure 8 path?
So we're not quite there yet. I mean, there is the possibility that atrium space could be open on the first floor, so you can just sort of wander into the green space and then you look up. There could be balcony railings at each floor, depending on how we close off the rest of it. It could be full glass at each floor looking into the atriums. There's some things that we have to look at in terms of the fire code and how it's washing sprinklers and all the rest of those things that have to be worked into. So there's other pieces that the administrator might know, keep following on the second floor.
Okay, I think we can talk this out when we,
My design, okay, still the same, nursing in the center, that it is, everybody look real quick. That's what I'm saying, it's still the same, it's not really different, less angles, okay? I'll turn it every way. Every way. I'll come to your office, I'll bring my husband.
okay, this workshop's adjourned.